The cold wind of November howled through the narrow alleyways of New York City. Among the shadows, beneath a pile of worn-out cardboard and an old navy blue blanket, lay a man named Leo Carter. His beard was wild, his hands were calloused, and his eyes, though tired, still held a spark of something rare: kindness. Leo hadn't always lived on the streets. There was a time when he had a job, a family, a home. But life had twisted cruelly. One tragic accident, one missed paycheck, one betrayal, and it all came crumbling down. Now, he found comfort in routines, scavenging, helping other homeless folks, and finding small moments of peace in a city that barely acknowledged his existence. That morning, as Leo warmed his hands over a rusted oil drum fire, he saw something strange in the distance. A man, older, frail, and clearly disoriented, was standing at the corner of 38th and Lexington. No coat, no hat, just a suit that looked decades old, and confusion written all over his wrinkled face. Leo watched for a moment. Cars passed. People passed. No one stopped. Something about the man didn't sit right. So Leo stood up, brushed the dirt off his pants, and approached him. "Sir, you okay?" Leo asked gently. The old man turned slowly. His blue eyes were pale and lost. I don't know where I am," he mumbled. Leo looked around. "You got anyone with you?" "Family." The man shook his head, shivering now. "No, I think I was going somewhere. I can't remember," Leo sighed. He had no money, no place to take him, but something in his gut told him he couldn't just walk away. "Come with me," he said. "I don't have much, but I've got a place that's out of the wind." He led the old man to the alley, offered him the blanket, shared a half sandwich he'd saved. The old man didn't say much, but as the hours passed, warmth returned to his eyes. "Name's Leo," he finally said. "What's yours?" The man paused. Arthur Whitmore." Leo didn't recognize the name. Why would he? For the next few days, Leo kept Arthur close. He guided him to soup kitchens, shielded him from street thugs, and gave him what little he could. Arthur was quiet, but polite. He had an air about him, educated, refined, but also broken. As if his memories were locked behind some fog he couldn't quite pierce. They talked in fragments. Arthur would recall a garden, a lake house, a woman named Evelyn. Then silence again. Leo didn't press. He knew what it meant to carry pain. One morning, while sitting in the public library to warm up, Arthur spotted a photo in an old business magazine. "That's me," he said suddenly, his hand trembling as he pointed at the page. Leo looked down. The article headline read, "Arthur Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire behind Whitmore Holdings." Leo's jaw dropped. No way. Arthur's memories returned in a flood that day. He was, indeed, the same Arthur Whitmore, a billionaire, a man who had built an empire in real estate, technology, and logistics. But after the death of his wife, Evelyn, 2 years ago, he had fallen into a deep depression. His mind began to slip. He refused treatment. One day, he simply walked away from it all. No one had seen him since. Leo helped Arthur contact the police, who in turn contacted his estate. News spread quickly. Headlines exploded. "Missing billionaire found living among the homeless." Act of kindness reunites Arthur Whitmore with his family. But Leo avoided the cameras. He wasn't interested in fame. He just wanted Arthur to be safe. Before leaving, Arthur turned to him. "You saved my life," he said softly. Leo smiled. "Guess we saved each other." Weeks passed. Leo returned to his alley. Nothing had changed, or so he thought, until a sleek black car pulled up beside the curb. Out stepped Arthur, clean-shaven, healthy, smiling. Beside him stood his daughter Emily and 2 lawyers. "I haven't forgotten what you did," Arthur said, "and I refuse to let you disappear into the cracks." They took Leo, Indiana, gave him clean clothes, a room, food. But more than that, they gave him purpose. Arthur hired him as a consultant for a new foundation, the Carter Whitmore Initiative, dedicated to helping homeless people find housing, therapy, and jobs. For the first time in years, Leo had a future. And it all started with one simple question. "Sir, you okay?" The next morning greeted the city with relentless rain. Jake, used to wet cardboard and damp clothes, found a rare patch under a scaffold where he and William could sit and talk. The old man was shivering, his lips slightly blue. Jake offered him half of his last dry blanket. "You'll catch pneumonia," he said. "Ain't worth it." William smiled weakly. "And what about you?" Jake chuckled. Me? I made peace with pneumonia a long time ago. They shared a silence, the kind that grows between people who've seen too much. William finally asked, "What happened to you, Jake?" Jake leaned back and looked at the sky. "You ever lose everything in a single day?" William didn't reply. "I had a family. A wife. Little girl. We lived in a small house. I worked construction. Nothing fancy, but it was enough. One day, drunk driver. Killed them both. I tried to keep going, but what's the point, you know? Started drinking, lost the job, then the house. After that, the street." William was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "I'm sorry. No one should go through that." Jake smiled sadly. "But I did. And so do a lot of people. We're just the invisible ones." That night, Jake took William to an old storage unit he sometimes sneaked into when it wasn't locked. Inside was a small box, dusty and dented. He opened it carefully. Inside were a few photos. A little girl with a missing front tooth, smiling wide. A woman with soft eyes. A small, cracked toy train. "This is my treasure," Jake whispered. "Only thing I've got left." William stared at the photos, especially the girl. His own daughter had died of cancer when she was only 7. That pain, the rawness of it, never left him. "This," he said, voice trembling. "This means everything." Jake nodded. "Yeah. Reminds me I used to be someone." William put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "You still are." Days turned into a week. William's health improved, but Jake began noticing strange things. A black car parked near their alley for hours. A man in a trench coat watching them from across the street. "Look," Jake said one night, pointing discreetly. "You sure you ain't hiding from someone?" William looked uneasy. I suppose I am." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Who exactly are you?" William looked away. Someone who walked away from a life that became too heavy to carry. But that wasn't enough. Jake didn't press further. He knew what it was like to need time. That night, Jake dreamt of fire and flashing lights, of a little girl calling his name. He woke up sweating. The next morning, the black car was gone, but a man in a suit approached them. "Mr. Hargraves," he said firmly. Jake looked confused. William stood up slowly, his voice suddenly filled with authority. "Thomas, I told you not to follow me." Jake turned to William. "Hargraves," Thomas continued. "Sir, your board is in chaos. The press is circling. You disappeared. You can't just leave. I needed time. Space. Humanity." Jake took a step back. "Wait, you're a Hargraves? As in Hargraves Industries?" William nodded slowly. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wanted to be just a man, not a name." Jake was silent. After Thomas left, William turned to Jake. "I understand if you're angry." Jake laughed once, bitterly. "Angry? You're a billionaire playing dress-up in an alleyway. You had choices. I didn't." William looked pained. "You're right. I had everything, but I didn't feel alive until I lost it. Until I met you." Jake shook his head. "And now what? You go back to your glass tower and forget the guy who shared his blanket with you." "No," William said firmly. "I don't forget people who saved my life." Jake scoffed. "I didn't save your life." William met his eyes. "You saved my soul." They sat in silence again, but something had changed. The truth was out. And now the question was, what next? 2 days after the revelation, William returned in a clean suit. He brought food, new clothes, and a strange nervousness. Jake eyed him with suspicion. "So what now? You come to save the poor." William knelt down and looked him in the eyes. "No, I came to give you a choice. I want to help you stand, if you want to." Jake remained silent. William continued. "A place to stay. A real one. A job. Counseling. Not charity, opportunity." Jake laughed bitterly. "Why me? There's 100 others on this block alone. Because you helped without asking anything. And because you still believe in people, even when life gave you no reason to." Jake stared at him for a long time. Then, quietly, "I don't know if I remember how to be someone." "You don't have to remember," William said gently. "We'll build it anew." Jake accepted the offer, hesitantly. William placed him in a quiet transitional house outside the city. For the first time in years, Jake slept in a real bed. No sirens. No rats. No fear of being mugged for his blanket. The silence was suffocating at first. He stared at the ceiling for hours that first night, waiting for something, anything, to go wrong. Nothing did. The next morning, he took a long shower. His reflection in the mirror startled him. The man staring back was older, but there was a flicker of life in his eyes. He touched his face, the stubble, the scars. and whispered, "I'm still here." William didn't just vanish after placing Jake in the shelter. He visited twice a week, always asking how Jake was feeling, what he needed. Jake started therapy. At first, he mocked the idea, but slowly he began to talk. He spoke about his daughter, her favorite bedtime story, how she used to make butterfly pancakes with her mom on Saturdays, how he felt the moment he saw the wreckage. He cried. For the first time in years, he let himself cry. His therapist said, "You never allowed yourself to grieve. You were surviving, not healing." Jake nodded. "Because I didn't think I deserved to." "You do," she said gently. "Everyone does." Months passed. Jake started working at a local construction supply warehouse. Nothing fancy, but it gave structure to his days. He arrived early, stayed late. The manager noticed. One afternoon, Jake walked past a young man sleeping by a dumpster behind the store. Something in his eyes looked familiar. Jake walked into the break room and came out with a sandwich and a bottle of water. "Here," he said, handing them over. The boy looked up, wary. "Why?" Jake smiled. "Because someone once did the same for me." That night, Jake journaled for the first time. He wrote, "Maybe pain isn't just a wound. Maybe it's the soil where kindness grows." One evening, William invited Jake to dinner, not at a mansion, but a small diner they'd passed 100 times while homeless. Over grilled cheese and tomato soup, William said, "I'm starting something. A foundation. For people like you. For stories like yours." Jake looked up. "I want you to help me run it." Jake blinked. "Me? Yes. Who better than someone who's lived it? I can provide funds. But you bring the soul." Jake sat quietly for a moment, then said, "I'm no savior." William smiled. "Neither am I. We're just two broken men who still believe in second chances." Jake stood at the threshold of a small office in downtown Brooklyn. The sign on the glass door read, "Second Light Foundation, Rebuilding Lives Together." It felt surreal. Just a year ago, he had been sleeping under that same bridge. Now he had a desk, a phone, even a team. But more than that, he had a mission. Yet, on some nights, old ghosts whispered. Memories clawed at the walls of his mind. His daughter's laughter, his wife's smile, the sound of that crash. He sometimes woke up sweating, gasping, heart racing. He didn't push those feelings away anymore. He let them come. And then he wrote them down. Jake began speaking at small shelters, rehab centers, and soup kitchens. He didn't bring hope from above. He spoke as one of them. He told his story raw, about loss, rage, the numb years, and the hand that reached for him when he no longer expected one. People listened. Some cried. Some simply nodded. After one speech, a young woman approached him with trembling hands. "I was going to end it tonight," she said quietly. "But then you said we're more than our worst day." Jake felt something shift in his chest. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are," he said, "and I'll prove it to you if you let me." The foundation grew. Within 6 months, they had helped over 120 people find transitional housing, 40 of them secure stable jobs, and 12 reunited with families. But it wasn't the numbers that drove Jake. It was the names, the faces. Luis, a former addict, now mentoring teens. Janet, who lost her leg and home in a fire, now working at a trauma center. Marcus, who had lived on the streets for 18 years, now laughing while painting a mural in a community center. These weren't statistics. These were survivors. Jake no longer woke up asking why he had survived. He now woke up knowing exactly why. One snowy morning, Jake received a letter in the mail, handwritten, neat, the kind only teachers used to send. It was from Ella, his daughter. He stared at the envelope for hours, hands trembling, tears threatening to spill. Then he opened it. "Dear Dad, I don't know if you're the same man I remember, but I saw your name in the news. Mom used to say no one grieves harder than a man who loved truly. I think you did. If you want to talk, I'm ready. Love, Ella." Jake broke. And for once, it wasn't from pain, but from the fragile, blinding light of hope. Jake waited on a park bench, the winter wind brushing his cheeks. Every car that passed made his heart jump. Then she appeared. Ella, grown, beautiful, her mother's chin his eyes. They stood in silence. Then she took a hesitant step forward. "You really are alive?" she whispered. "I am," Jake said, his voice breaking. "And I'm sorry I wasn't there. But I never stopped loving you. Not one day." Ella looked down, then up. "Can we start again?" Jake reached out, unsure. Ella stepped into his arms. Years of silence, of pain, of absence. melted in that moment of fragile reunion. And for the first time in over a decade, Jake felt whole. Jake and Ella began slowly. Weekend walks, coffee shop conversations, shared memories that didn't hurt quite as much anymore. She showed him photos of her life, college, art projects, her cat named Pepper. Jake brought stories of the people he helped, the lives transformed. "I thought I'd never see you again," Ella said one afternoon, watching the city lights reflect in the Hudson. "I didn't think I deserved to," Jake replied. "You don't have to deserve love, Dad," she whispered. "You just have to accept it." 8 months later, the Second Light Foundation held its first official gala. It wasn't glamorous, plastic chairs, home-cooked food, a cheap rented mic, but the hall was full. Survivors, donors, volunteers. And one man, sitting quietly in the back, Mr. Reynolds. He had watched Jake from afar, never interfered. He wanted Jake to rebuild on his own. But now he was ready. After Jake's speech, raw, powerful, tear-stained, Reynolds approached him. "You've done well, son." Jake shook his head. "I just did what you taught me. Believe in people." Reynolds smiled. "Then let's believe together." He handed Jake a check. The number made Jake blink twice. $1 million. "To help more people," Reynolds said. "And maybe to build something permanent." With new funding, the foundation opened its first permanent transitional center, the Haven. A renovated brownstone, it had 12 rooms, a kitchen, a library, even a rooftop garden. Every brick, every nail, placed with care. Jake visited daily. He didn't sit behind a desk. He cooked with residents, listened to stories, sometimes cried with them. "You don't act like a boss," one young man joked. Jake smiled. "That's because I'm not. I'm just a man who got a second chance. Now I'm passing it forward." The walls of Haven echoed with laughter, tears, and above all, hope. 1 year later, Jake was invited to speak on national television. The host introduced him as the man who went from homeless to hero. Jake chuckled. "I'm not a hero," he said. "Just someone who fell hard and was lucky enough to have someone reach for him when he was down." The host asked him what message he wanted to share. Jake looked into the camera. "Every life has value. No matter how lost, how broken, how forgotten. All it takes is one act of kindness. One moment of humanity." He paused. "And if you can be that for someone, do it. Don't wait." One evening, Jake visited the old bridge he used to sleep under. He placed a small plaque on the brick wall. "To those who feel invisible, you are seen. You are loved. You are not alone." He sat there for a while, watching the city lights flicker, feeling the cool air brush his face. Then he stood, walked to the street corner, and offered his last sandwich to a man curled up under a coat. "Here," Jake said softly. "It gets better. I promise." And somewhere deep in the night, another story began. One morning, Jake found a letter slipped under the door of his office at the Haven. It was from Ella. "Dad, I used to carry so much anger. I thought your absence defined who I was. But over the last year, I've seen something different. You're not the same man who left. You're better. I see you now in the eyes of the people you help, in the home you built with your own pain, in the second chances you give others every day. I'm proud to be your daughter. Let's never lose each other again." Jake sat silently for a long time, tears falling without resistance. He pressed the letter to his chest. That evening, he took Ella to dinner. No words needed, just warmth. And time reclaimed. Months later, on a quiet Wednesday evening, the Haven's bell rang. Jake answered the door to find a familiar face, the man with the dog, the first person Jake had shared his last dollar with, back when he was homeless himself. He looked worn but determined. "You once gave me a sandwich and said, 'It gets better.' I didn't believe you." Jake smiled. "Do you now?" The man nodded. "Not completely, but I'm ready to try." Jake welcomed him inside. That night, the cycle came full circle because healing doesn't end with one person. It spreads like fire, like light. A year later, Jake was nominated for a humanitarian award. He didn't want to go. "This isn't about me," he told Reynolds. "It's about the people." Reynolds replied with a quiet smile. "Sometimes people need a face to remind them of what's possible." So Jake stood before a grand hall, tuxedo feeling awkward, lights glaring. He told the story, not of himself, but of the hundreds now living with hope because someone once believed in them, because one stranger refused to walk past suffering. He ended with, "Kindness isn't charity. It's justice. It's survival. And in this world, It might be the only thing worth building. The standing ovation didn't matter. But seeing Ella in the front row, clapping through tears, that did. Jake never chased fame. Even with recognition, he stayed close to the street, boots dirty, hands busy, always listening. One spring morning, he walked with Ella through the garden on the Haven's roof. Flowers bloomed. Bees hummed. Peace lingered. I used to think I had nothing to give, he told her. You gave everything, she replied. They sat in silence for a while. Ella leaned her head on his shoulder. You gave people a reason to try again, including me. Jake exhaled, slow and full. Maybe this was what redemption looked like, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, real. Years passed. Jake's beard turned silver. His steps grew slower, but his fire never dimmed. On the anniversary of the Haven's founding, he visited the old bridge. The place it all began. A bench now stood there, with a plaque. In honor of the man who chose kindness when the world gave him nothing. Jake Thompson, 1961-2041. It gets better. I promise. Yes, Jake had passed. Peacefully, in his sleep, after decades of changing lives. But his story didn't end. Because every person he lifted now lifted someone else. Every act of kindness grew roots and bloomed. A boy once without a name had become a symbol. A legacy. A twist in life's story that no one expected, but everyone needed.